Book 3, Integration, Not Assimilation. Introduction. The main objective of this section is to define and explain the differences between cultural integration and cultural assimilation, and the different consequences of each. We will discuss the importance of social space creation as a powerful tool for the integration of long-term immigrants into host societies, preventing their loss of identity and underutilization, and preserving positive interactions between communities. Cultural integration and assimilation are key concepts in the study of sociology and anthropology, especially in the context of migration and the coexistence of diverse cultures within a society. Although both terms relate to the way in which individuals or groups are incorporated into a new culture, they differ fundamentally in their approach and outcomes. For a migrant who has to leave his or her country for reasons such as war, natural disaster, human rights deprivation, or situations of misery and poverty, the way in which integration into the host society takes place is essential. It has to be understood that a person who leaves his or her homeland forcibly and not voluntarily, because he or she has found a better job or out of love, for example, goes through a difficult emotional process. Leaving your homeland and your roots behind, often together with your family and friends, is painful and complicated to manage. If, in addition, when you arrive in a society completely different from your own, you have to face discrimination, marginalization, difficulty in accessing public services, language barriers, etc., it becomes 10 times more difficult. For all these reasons, the way in which the host country integrates migrants arriving in its land is absolutely crucial for their emotional well-being and for creating a harmonious and enriching coexistence. Countries such as France, for example, tend to try to assimilate all migrants who set foot on their territory. This means that migrants have to try to leave behind all their cultural expressions, such as clothing, hairstyles, way of speaking and relating to others, etc. In addition, assimilationist countries often prohibit all religious expression in their public spaces, which can lead to great internal conflicts among people. For a great many citizens, their religion is essential to their identity. It is totally linked to who they are and how they inhabit the world. Such prohibitions influence their self-appreciation, the new relationships they will form in the host country, and their emotional well-being. The rejection they will perceive from such societies will lead them to hide much of who they are. It will create major internal conflicts between what they think they need to do to fit into the new country and what they are, feel, and need to express in order to feel like free citizens and in line with their beliefs and way of living in the world. The problem, in our view, is that these modern Western societies fear that a large migratory flow could jeopardize their own freedoms and belief systems. Assimilationism is a way of trying to shield their democracies and their individual freedoms, based on a fear and xenophobia that are present in all the political decisions they usually approve. The reception of migrants from any other culture or religion should not pose any risk to their democracy or their citizens. Human beings can live together in multiculturalism if policies of respectful integration are carried out, embracing that same multiculturalism and what each individual of any religion or culture can contribute to the socio-cultural life of the respective host countries. Each of these models that we have discussed, on the one hand, underlies the specific legal measures adopted on labor integration, and on the other hand, will have different psychosocial consequences that will end up favoring or hindering the expression of xenophobic attitudes, with the major social problems that this will eventually have. The aim of this section is to analyze to what extent the different legislative measures that are being implemented facilitate the assimilationist model or the multicultural model. Migratory processes are connatural to human societies, and indeed have existed for millennia. But today's globalization has exponentially multiplied capitalism. See Ovejero, 2004-2005. Capitalism, both directly and indirectly, has always encouraged migration, seeking cheap labor on the one hand, and on the other, producing misery in many regions of the planet, which obviously always provokes migratory processes. Globalization is increasing these tendencies, which are so inherent to capitalism, to unsuspected limits. Indeed, the decline of labor rights in developed countries, their non-existence in developing countries, the strong tendencies to relocate, the extreme impoverishment of large areas of the planet, especially in the case of sub-Saharan Africa, etc., are contributing mightily to the increase in migratory flows to unprecedented levels. In short, current capitalist globalization is producing such levels of social exclusion, see Ovejero, 2002, 2003, that it is forcibly increasing immigration to previously unsuspected limits. Current globalization is not only increasing these levels, but also giving them a very worrying tinge, at least for these three reasons. A. Predominance of neoliberal policies and decreasing possibility of state intervention, which makes it difficult to correct the errors of the law of the market, with the serious consequences this will have for immigrants. B. Technological progress so accelerated that it will be difficult, if not impossible, for the most backward countries to catch up or even come close to the most advanced countries. C. Strong impediments and obstacles to immigration on the part of the public authorities, as well as profound xenophobic attitudes on the part of the population, with a media that only encourages such attitudes. In line with the above, at least in our view, the main challenge facing European societies over the coming decades is precisely to be able to integrate properly and effectively the cultural and ethnic minorities resulting from immigration. The challenge is to build multicultural, democratic, socially cohesive societies that do not exclude anyone, whatever their religion, culture, or ethnicity, while at the same time maintaining our system of freedoms and democracy. To this end, we will have to find ways to reduce prejudice in order to prevent racism and xenophobia. We can affirm that we are in the presence of one of the most important and socially relevant issues of the coming decades: integration policies for a human group that, coming from beyond national borders, will shape, in one way or another, a new reality. Their rights and future, as well as how to manage multiple identities and relations between immigrants and natives, are currently under discussion. In recent decades, the social debate on the suitability and applicability of different theoretical paradigms on the integration of immigrants in host societies has been constant. These models attempt to establish a scheme or script that allows for a satisfactory approach to the migration phenomenon and to achieve an ideal coexistence between natives and migrants. These models function as a template for comparing the different social situations that arise as a result of the incorporation of newcomers into society. Let us look at the different options. 1. Assimilation. It is a process of adaptation of the immigrant to the receiving society, which requires that she acquires the culture, customs, and ways of life of the host community, leaving aside her own, thus disappearing her condition of being a stranger or different. It is then that the adopting society will recognize her, as one of its own, thus producing full integration of the immigrant. The responsibility for this adaptation process falls solely on the immigrants. It is unilateral. It is they who must make the effort to bring their way of life into conformity with the civic standards of their new land. Assimilationist ideology is based on the following elements. A. Homogeneity as a starting point. The host or dominant society is culturally homogeneous, or at least perceived as such by its members, in the pre-contact situation. There is a deliberate interest in portraying it that way, because if diversity were to be admitted, the question of which traditions or ethno-cultural groups should be assimilated and which should not. In any case, when such diversity is evident, the emphasis is placed on the mainstream or national character of the issue, assuming that this is good, possible, and necessary. B. The homogeneous society also as a goal. If the cultural minorities present in the society acquire the language, customs, ways of life, etc., of the host community, the result of social interaction will be a homogeneous and united society in a shorter or longer period of time. C. Unilateralism in the process of change. In the assimilationist scheme, cultural and social change does not affect all members of society equally, natives and immigrants, but the burden of adaptation falls on the new tenants. D. Cultural integration as global integration. This model exaggerates, as a criterion for integration, the weight of the cultural, leaving aside the social criterion. It therefore exacerbates ethnic, linguistic, and religious differences, and sets aside distinctions of class, gender, etc. E.U. Disappearance of prejudice and discrimination after effective assimilation. This aspect derives directly from the previous one. If the individual fully adopts the language, customs, clothing, religion, etc. of the receiving group, any prejudices and discriminatory behavior that may arise towards him or her because of being different will automatically disappear unless some salient characteristics remain, such as a different skin color. F. Naturalness and inevitability of the assimilation process. The main axiom of this model is that the assimilation process is a natural and inevitable result of contact between natives and immigrants. Cultural assimilation, therefore, is the process by which a person or group adopts the dominant culture of the society as their own, while abandoning their distinct cultural identity. Traditional immigrant receiving countries, such as the US, Canada, Australia, or France, expected immigrants to progressively abandon their cultural heritage and assimilate into the cultural patterns of the host country. The assimilation of immigrants was one aspect of the strong tendency towards homogenization that characterized the process of nation-state building. The spread of compulsory schooling, public administration, internal mobility, and urban growth favored the construction of political units based on one language, one culture, and one national identity. With the formation of nation-states, national culture is sacralized, elevated to a principle of social and political cohesion. Alvarez, 1993-12. A distinction is often made here between European nation-states and immigrant nations. However, policies of cultural homogenization were also pursued in the United States, Australia, Canada, and Argentina. Although their ideological legitimization varied from one country to another, similar measures were adopted in all cases. Promotion of a common language, a single curricular content in education, participation in national institutions, identification with symbolic references and historical myths, and so on. These measures formed genuine nation-building programs that appeared to be linked to important objectives such as a modern economy, a literate population, and greater political and social cohesion. Assimilationist theories have been strongly criticized, not only from an ethical point of view, but also from their preconceptions of homogeneity, etc. France is the country where this model has been most directly applied. 2. Multiculturalism. It is the first expression of cultural pluralism, and its basic postulate is non-discrimination on grounds of ethnicity or culture, the praise and recognition of cultural difference, as well as the right of immigrants to it. Multiculturalism is undoubtedly an anti-assimilationist philosophy, taking shape both as a de facto situation and as a proposal for social organization. Multiculturalism emerged as a reaction to the trend towards cultural standardization imposed by globalization. Under the ambiguous term of tolerance, new citizens are encouraged to live in their community and to tolerate other ethno-cultural communities within society. The identity and cultural values of the group thus become the basic pillar on which the whole multiculturalist philosophy rests. Many multiculturalist measures have sought to reinforce the integration process. Positive discrimination measures, such as quotas, are aimed at facilitating the incorporation of minorities into public institutions and social spaces that make up citizenship. Other measures, such as the revision of curricular content or work schedules, aim to adapt these institutions and spaces. A third block of measures would refer to the promotion of their own language and culture and of associations. A fourth type of measure involves the establishment of local services and institutions. In any case, it is this last type of measures that, depending on their application, can generate a dynamic of limited inclusion in society as a whole. However, after the first phase of the recognition of cultural communities, the main focus of multicultural policies in Canada, Quebec, and the Netherlands has been on facilitating social inclusion and enhancing civic commonalities. In addition, it should be added that all three governments have developed and implemented, as part of their multiculturalist policies, various social policy measures in the areas of urban planning, housing, and social and labor market integration, with clear redistributive objectives, with better or worse results. This introduces another element to consider in the debate. Multiculturalist measures are a modest element of a much broader set of government policies. Good or bad immigrant integration has much more to do with citizenship, education, and employment policies, which have always been the main pillars of integration. Kimlicka, 2003, 189. In other words, the problems of immigrant integration cannot be read exclusively in terms of cultural difference. They have to do with the social problems generated by the unequal distribution of wealth, security, and inclusion, and the social policies adopted in this regard. Such problems tend, as we have seen, to be ethnified in our societies that combine social inequality and cultural pluralism. In this sense, they have an undeniable cultural and identity dimension. Countries that have adopted multiculturalist policies do not have a worse social integration record than other countries, or a greater decline in redistributive social policies. Canada, Quebec, and the Netherlands, particularly the latter two, are no worse off than France in these respects. The same is not true of the United States. This illustrates that the differences in terms of social integration do not lie so much in the greater or lesser degree of multiculturalism, but in the social policies implemented, or the lack of them. According to Kimlicka, immigrants integrate more quickly in countries that have official multicultural policies, such as Canada and Australia, than in countries that do not, such as the United States and France. Kimlicka, 2003, 209. It is not necessary to share Kimlicka's categorical assessment to affirm that the first major criticism of multiculturalism, which presents it as anti-integration, does not hold water. One of the challenges facing our globalized societies is the proper management of growing pluralism. Multiculturalist policies emerged as a response to this challenge and, although not without problems, they have been consolidated and at the same time modified their accents. By implying a recognition of identity minorities, these policies are fairer and offer, from the outset, a better accommodation of pluralism. Their balance sheet, in terms of integration and cohesion, is positive and, in any case, no worse than that of societies such as France that apply other policies. Moreover, unlike the French model, multiculturalism has shown a broad capacity to adapt to different circumstances. Cultural integration refers to a two-way process in which immigrants or cultural minorities adopt certain aspects of the dominant culture of the host country, while simultaneously the receiving society accepts and enriches itself with elements of the new members' cultures. This process involves a mutual and respectful adaptation, where immigrants are not expected to give up their original cultural identity. Rather than unifying everyone under one cultural standard, integration values diversity and seeks to create a harmonious coexistence where different cultures coexist and respect each other. For example, in an integration context, a person can maintain his or her mother tongue and religious traditions while learning and participating in the cultural practices of the receiving country. Public policies in an integration model tend to promote multiculturalism and inclusion, offering services in several languages and recognizing festivities of different cultures. Integration fosters a pluralistic society where cultural diversity is seen as a strength. Cultural assimilation, in contrast, is a one-way process in which immigrants or minorities are absorbed into the dominant culture to the point of losing, partially or completely, their original cultural identity. In this approach, new members of society are expected to adopt the norms, values, and behaviors of the majority culture, minimizing their cultural differences. Assimilation can be voluntary when immigrants wish to integrate fully into the new culture, or forced when the host country's policies require cultural conformity as a condition for social acceptance. An example of assimilation can be observed when an immigrant family stops speaking their native language at home in favor of the language of the receiving country, abandons their traditional customs, and fully adopts local customs. Public policies in an assimilation model often focus on cultural homogenization, promoting the exclusive use of the official language and celebrating only the national holidays of the receiving country. While cultural integration and assimilation are responses to diversity within a society, they differ significantly in their approach and consequences for individuals and society as a whole. Integration values and celebrates cultural diversity, promoting coexistence enriched by multiple cultural influences, while assimilation seeks cultural uniformity, often at the expense of immigrants' cultural identity and practices. Creating a social space that promotes integration rather than assimilation is of utmost importance in building inclusive, diverse, and cohesive societies. This approach not only preserves and values cultural diversity, but also promotes individual and collective well-being, fosters innovation, and strengthens social justice. In an increasingly interconnected and diverse world, integration is the key to harmonious and enriching coexistence. The difference between the two concepts is fundamental to understanding how a community can thrive by maintaining a healthy balance between diversity and unity. Creating a social space geared towards integration rather than assimilation is essential to building an inclusive, respectful, and cohesive society. These spaces provide a supportive environment in which both newcomers and long-term residents can engage in meaningful dialogue and cultural exchange. These interactions help to break down stereotypes and prejudices, fostering mutual understanding and empathy. When people from different backgrounds come together in a spirit of respect and curiosity, they are more likely to find common ground and build lasting relationships. This sense of community cohesion is essential to creating a stable and peaceful society. Integration-oriented social spaces recognize and value the cultural diversity that migrants and refugees bring with them. They encourage people to retain their cultural identities and traditions while participating fully in the social, economic, and political life of the host country. This approach fosters a sense of belonging and respect that allows migrants to feel valued and accepted for who they are. By celebrating cultural diversity, integration-oriented social spaces enrich the whole community, introducing new perspectives, customs, and ideas that can lead to greater innovation and cultural vitality. Integration emphasizes mutual respect, cultural exchange, and the coexistence of diverse identities, while assimilation often requires immigrants and refugees to abandon their cultural origins in order to adapt to the dominant culture. Understanding the importance of this distinction is key to understanding why social spaces that focus on integration are more beneficial and humane. Integration respects the fundamental human rights of migrants and refugees, recognizing their right to preserve their cultural identity and to participate in society without discrimination or marginalization. This approach is in line with international principles of human rights and dignity, promoting a more just and equitable world. Conversely, assimilation pressures migrants and refugees to conform to the cultural norms and values of the host society, often at the expense of their own identity. This can lead to feelings of alienation, resentment, and loss of self, as people are forced to suppress important aspects of their heritage. Assimilation can create a one-sided relationship in which the host culture is seen as superior, and the cultural contributions of immigrants are undervalued or ignored. This dynamic can perpetuate inequality and social division, rather than fostering genuine unity. In conclusion, we consider it important to stress that the creation of social spaces oriented towards integration rather than assimilation is essential to foster inclusion, mutual respect, and cultural richness. Integration promotes the coexistence of diverse identities, enriching the host society and empowering immigrants to contribute meaningfully. It builds stronger and more cohesive communities by fostering dialogue and understanding, and respects the fundamental rights and dignity of all people. By focusing on integration, we can create a more harmonious and vibrant society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.